David had always been the kind of man who believed in working hard for his family. At 34 years old, he spent his days managing construction crews, making sure buildings went up straight and strong. His hands were rough from years of honest work, and his back ached most evenings, but he never complained. Everything he did was for his wife, Lisa, and their 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. The sun was just starting to peek through the bedroom curtains when David's alarm went off. At 5 in the morning, he moved quietly, trying not to wake Lisa, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. Her dark hair was spread across the pillow, and for a moment he remembered the young woman he had fallen in love with 9 years ago. Back then, her smile could light up any room, and her laugh was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. Things had been different lately, though. Lisa seemed tired all the time, and when she did smile, it never quite reached her eyes. David told himself it was just stress. Maybe she was overwhelmed with taking care of Sophie while he worked long hours. Maybe she needed a break, something special to remind her how much he loved her. That's when he got the idea for Paris. Lisa had always talked about visiting France someday. She had old books about French art and culture stacked on her nightstand, and sometimes he would catch her staring at pictures of the Eiffel Tower on her phone. For the past 3 months, David had been taking on extra shifts, working weekends, and saying yes to every overtime opportunity that came his way. The other guys on his crew thought he was crazy. "You're working yourself to death, man," his buddy, Tony, would say during lunch breaks. "When's the last time you took a day off?" David would just shrug and take another bite of his sandwich. "I'm saving up for something special," he would tell them. What he didn't say was that he had already put down a deposit on a week-long trip to Paris for Lisa's birthday next month. He had booked a nice hotel near the Seine River, and even found a tour that would take them to all the art museums she loved reading about. But working so much meant he was hardly ever home. Most days he left before Sophie woke up and came back after she had already had dinner and finished her homework. Lisa would have Sophie's lunch packed and ready for school, help her with her reading, and handle everything around the house by herself. David knew it wasn't fair to her, but he kept telling himself it would all be worth it when he surprised her with the trip. He had no idea that while he was putting in 12-hour days to make his wife happy, she was feeling more alone than ever. On Tuesday morning, everything seemed normal. David kissed Lisa goodbye while she was still half asleep, grabbed his lunch from the fridge, and headed out to the job site. They were working on a new office building downtown, and today they were supposed to finish the inspection of the 3rd floor. The work went smoother than expected. David's crew had been together for years, and they worked like a well-oiled machine. By noon, they were ahead of schedule. The building inspector showed up early and was impressed with their progress. "You guys do good work," the inspector told David as he signed off on the paperwork. "I've seen a lot of sloppy construction lately, but this is solid. You should be proud." David felt a warm sense of satisfaction. This was why he worked so hard, to do things right, to build something that would last. It was the same way he thought about his marriage and his family. You put in the work, you do things right, and everything would be strong and stable. By 2 o'clock, the inspection was complete and the crew was packing up their tools. David's foreman, an older man named Pete, clapped him on the shoulder. "Why, don't you head home early today, David? You've been working nonstop for months. Spend some time with that beautiful family of yours." David's first instinct was to say no. There was always more work to be done, more money to be made. But then, he thought about Sophie. When was the last time he had picked her up from school? When was the last time he had sat with her while she did her homework or read her a bedtime story? "You know what, Pete? I think I will." The drive home felt different somehow. Instead of the usual traffic and stress, David found himself looking forward to surprising his family. Maybe he could take Sophie to the park down the street. She loved the swings there, and he could push her as high as she wanted to go. Maybe he could help Lisa with dinner, or they could all watch a movie together. He even stopped at the grocery store and picked up some flowers for Lisa. Nothing fancy, just a small bouquet of daisies from the display near the checkout counter. The teenage cashier smiled at him as she rang them up. "Someone's going to have a good day," she said. David grinned back. "I hope so." As he pulled into the driveway of their small 2-story house, David felt lighter than he had in months. House looked peaceful in the afternoon sunlight. Lisa's car was parked in its usual spot, and he could see Sophie's bicycle leaning against the garage door where she always left it after school. But there was another car there too, a silver sedan that David didn't recognize. It was parked right behind Lisa's car as if someone had been in a hurry and just pulled in quickly. David frowned as he gathered his things and the flowers from the passenger seat. Maybe it was one of Lisa's friends from the neighborhood. She didn't have many visitors during the day, but sometimes the other moms would stop by to chat or drop off something for Sophie. The front door was unlocked, which was normal for a Tuesday afternoon. David stepped inside quietly, planning to surprise them. The living room was empty, but he could hear the television playing softly in the background. Sophie's backpack was dropped by the front door, and her school shoes were kicked off carelessly. In the hallway, "Hello?" David called out, but not too loudly. "I'm home early." No one answered. The house felt strangely quiet, even with the television on. Usually Sophie would come running when she heard his voice, excited to tell him about her day at school. Lisa would call out from wherever she was, asking how work went. David set the flowers on the kitchen counter and walked toward the stairs. Maybe they were upstairs. Maybe Sophie was taking a nap, or Lisa was helping her with homework in her room. But as he reached the bottom of the stairs, he heard something that made his stomach drop. Voices, coming from upstairs. Lisa's voice, but also a man's voice that David had never heard before. His first thought was completely innocent. Maybe it was a repairman. Maybe something had broken and Lisa had called someone to fix it. But then he remembered that Lisa always told him when service people were coming to the house. She would mention it over breakfast or send him a text during the day. David climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. The voices were coming from down the hall, near their bedroom. He could hear Lisa laughing, a sound he hadn't heard in months. She sounded happy, genuinely happy, in a way that made David's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. But before he could process what that meant, he heard another sound that stopped him cold. A small sniffle coming from Sophie's room. David pushed open his daughter's bedroom door and found her sitting on her bed, clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a worn-out rabbit she had named Benny. Sophie's face was red and streaked with tears, and when she saw her father, her lower lip started to tremble. "Daddy?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe he was really there. David was across the room in 2 steps, scooping his little girl into his arms. She felt so small and fragile, and she was shaking slightly. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm even though his heart was racing. "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" Sophie buried her face in his shoulder. "Mommy told me to stay in my room and not come out. She said she had a friend over and I had to be quiet." David felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What kind of friend, Sophie?" "A man," Sophie said in a tiny voice. "I heard them talking and laughing, but then I heard other sounds and they scared me. I wanted to ask Mommy for a snack, but she said I couldn't come out." The voices from down the hall became clearer now. Lisa's voice soft and happy, the man's voice deep and unfamiliar, and underneath it all, other sounds that David recognized but wished he didn't. His daughter had been sitting here alone, scared and confused, while her mother was in the next room destroying everything David had worked so hard to build. The flowers he had bought were still downstairs on the kitchen counter, wilting already in the afternoon heat. The Paris trip he had been planning seemed like a joke now. All those extra hours, all that time away from his family, all of it had been for nothing. But looking down at Sophie's tear-streaked face, David realized that his daughter needed him more than ever. Whatever was happening down the hall, whatever his marriage had become, Sophie was still his little girl and she was scared. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, holding her tighter. "Daddy's here now. Everything's going to be okay." Even as he said the words, David wasn't sure he believed them, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to protect his daughter from this. Whatever came next, Sophie would always come first. David held Sophie close for what felt like forever, his mind racing with thoughts he didn't want to have. His little girl's tears had stopped. but she was still clinging to him like he might disappear if she let go. The sounds from down the hall had gone quiet now, but somehow that silence felt even worse than the voices had been. "Daddy, I'm scared," Sophie whispered against his shoulder. "Is Mommy okay?" She sounded different. David closed his eyes and took a deep breath. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her world is about to change forever? How do you tell her that the safe, happy home she's always known might not exist anymore? "Sweetheart, I need you to do something for me," David said gently, pulling back so he could look at Sophie's face. "I'm going to call Aunt Jenny and ask her to come pick you up. You can go to her house and play with your cousin Amy for a while." Sophie's eyes widened. "But why? I don't want to leave, I want to stay with you." "I know, baby, I know." David's voice was barely holding steady. "But Daddy needs to talk to Mommy about something important, and it's grown-up stuff that you don't need to worry about." Jenny was Lisa's younger sister, and she lived only 15 minutes away. She had always been good with Sophie, and her daughter Amy was just a year older than Sophie. The two girls loved playing together, and Jenny wouldn't ask too many questions right away. David pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called Jenny's number. She answered on the second ring. "David? What's wrong? You sound upset." "Jenny, I need a favor. Can you come pick up Sophie right now? I need someone to watch her for a few hours." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Jenny knew David well enough to hear the strain in his voice. "Of course. Is everything okay? Is Lisa all right? Just please come as soon as you can. And maybe Sophie can stay for dinner too. I'll explain everything later. I'm already getting my keys. I'll be there in 10 minutes. David hung up and looked at Sophie, who was watching him with worried eyes. Kids always knew when something was wrong, even when adults tried to hide it. "Aunt Jenny is coming to get you," David said, trying to smile. "You can play with Amy and maybe watch a movie. Won't that be fun?" Sophie nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "Will you come get me later?" "Yes, sweetheart, I promise. No matter what happens, Daddy will always come for you." While they waited for Jenny, David helped Sophie pack a small bag with her pajamas and her toothbrush. She insisted on taking Benny, her stuffed rabbit, and David was grateful for anything that might make her feel safer. The voices from down the hall had started again, quieter now but still there. David could hear Lisa's laugh, and it made his stomach turn. How long had this been going on? How many times had he worked late while his wife was here with another man? How many times had Sophie been sent to her room so they could be alone? When Jenny arrived, she took one look at David's face and knew something serious was happening. But she was smart enough not to ask questions in front of Sophie. "Hey there, princess," Jenny said brightly, scooping Sophie into a hug. "Amy is so excited to see you. She's been asking all week when you could come over." Sophie looked back at David one more time before leaving. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, baby. More than all the stars in the sky." After Jenny's car pulled out of the driveway, David stood in the front hallway of his house and felt completely alone. The home he had worked so hard to provide for his family suddenly felt like a stranger's house. Everything looked the same. The family photos on the wall, Sophie's drawings stuck to the refrigerator, the couch where he and Lisa used to watch movies together. But it all felt fake now, like a stage set for a play that was ending. David walked slowly up the stairs, each step feeling like he was climbing toward his own execution. The voices from the bedroom had stopped again, and he could hear movement, someone getting dressed maybe, water running in the bathroom. He stood outside his own bedroom door for a long moment, trying to prepare himself for what he was about to see. But nothing could have really prepared him. This was his wife, the woman he had loved for 9 years, the mother of his child. This was the person he had trusted more than anyone else in the world. David pushed open the door. Lisa was sitting on the edge of their bed, wearing a robe he had bought her last Christmas. Her hair was messy, and she was looking down at her phone. When she heard the door open, she looked up, expecting to see Sophie. Instead, she saw her husband. The color drained from Lisa's face so fast that David thought she might faint. Her phone slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. "David," she whispered. "You're home early." "Yeah," David said quietly. "I am." He could hear water still running in their bathroom. Someone was taking a shower. In his bathroom. In his house. While his daughter sat scared in her bedroom. "Where's Sophie?" Lisa asked, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "She's safe. That's all you need to know right now." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but David felt nothing when he saw them. 6 months ago, those tears would have broken his heart. He would have done anything to make them stop. Now they just made him angry. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Lisa, explain why our daughter was sitting in her room crying while you were in here with another man. Explain why she's been scared and confused while I've been working extra hours to surprise you with a trip to Paris for your birthday." Lisa's face crumpled. "Paris?" 3 months of overtime, Lisa. 3 months of saying yes to every extra shift, every weekend job, every opportunity to make more money. Because I wanted to give you something special. Because I thought maybe if I could show you how much I love you, things would get better between us. David pulled the Paris confirmation email up on his phone and showed it to her. Lisa read it with growing horror. "The hotel near the Seine River that you always talked about. The art museum tours. The fancy dinner reservations. I put down a deposit 3 weeks ago." Lisa was crying harder now, but David couldn't stop. 9 years of marriage, and it had come to this. "How long?" he asked. "David, please." "How long, Lisa?" The water in the bathroom shut off. David could hear someone moving around in there, probably getting dressed and trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. 4 months. Lisa whispered. 4 months. David felt like he had been punched in the stomach. 4 months of lies. 4 months of coming home to fake smiles and pretending everything was normal. 4 months of Lisa kissing him goodbye in the morning and then spending her afternoons with another man. "Who is he?" Lisa looked toward the bathroom door. "His name is Ryan. He's my personal trainer at the gym." David almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about any of this. The gym membership he had bought for Lisa last year because she said she wanted to get back in shape after having Sophie. He had paid for it. He had encouraged her to go. He had even bought her new workout clothes. "So while I was working 12-hour days to pay for our life, you were at the gym with him." "It wasn't supposed to happen," Lisa said desperately. We started talking and he made me feel." "Feel what?" "Young, attractive, like I mattered. You do matter." David's voice was louder than he intended. "You're my wife. You're Sophie's mother. How could you think you don't matter?" "Because you're never here," Lisa shot back, her sadness turning to anger. "When's the last time we had a real conversation, David? When's the last time you asked me how I'm feeling or what I need? You work all the time, and when you come home, you're too tired to talk. I felt like I was married to a ghost." David stared at his wife, this woman he had thought he knew completely. "So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to have an affair? Instead of telling me you were lonely, you brought another man into our home? Into our bed? While our daughter was here?" The bathroom door opened, and a man David had never seen before stepped out. He was younger than David, maybe late 20s, with the kind of muscles that came from spending all day at a gym instead of working construction. He was fully dressed and clearly wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. "I should go," the man said awkwardly. David looked at him, this stranger who had been in his house in his bed, while his daughter cried alone in her room. "Yeah," David said quietly. "You should." The man grabbed his gym bag and headed for the door. He paused for a moment like he might say something, but David's expression stopped him. He left without another word. And then David and Lisa were alone in their bedroom in the house they had bought together when Sophie was a baby, surrounded by all the memories of the life they had built and the future they had planned. "I never meant for this to happen," Lisa said through her tears. "I never wanted to hurt you or Sophie." David sat down heavily in the chair by their window, the same chair where he used to sit and watch Lisa get ready for work back when they were happy, back when they were a real family. "But you did hurt us, Lisa. You hurt us in the worst way possible." The silence in the bedroom felt heavier than anything David had ever carried on a construction site. Lisa sat on their bed, tears streaming down her face, while David remained in the chair by the window. Outside, life was going on as normal. He could see Mrs. Johnson from next door watering her flowers, and a school bus dropping off kids at the end of the street. But inside this room, everything had changed forever. "I don't know what to say," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know sorry isn't enough." David looked at his wife, really looked at her. When had they stopped seeing each other? When had they become strangers living in the same house? He could see the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago, but she felt like someone from a dream now. "When did you stop loving me?" David asked quietly. Lisa's head snapped up. "I never stopped loving you." "Then how could you do this? How could you bring him here into our home while Sophie was here? How could you risk everything we built together?" Lisa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know. I don't know how it got this far. At first it was just talking. Ryan would ask me about my day, and he actually listened when I answered. He made me laugh. He made me feel like I was more than just a mom who does laundry and makes dinner." David felt a sharp pain in his chest. "Is that all you think you are? To me? Someone who does laundry? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, David? When's the last time we talked about something other than bills or Sophie's school or what needs to be fixed around the house?" David opened his mouth to argue, but the words died in his throat. When was the last time? He tried to remember the last real conversation they had had, the last time they had talked about their hopes and fears and plans for the future. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. "I was working for us," he said weakly. "Everything I did was for our family." "I know," Lisa said. "And I appreciate it, I really do. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being a couple and became just roommates who happened to have a child together." David stood up and walked to the dresser where their wedding photo sat. They looked so young and happy in the picture. Lisa was wearing her grandmother's pearls, and David had borrowed his father's good suit. They had been so sure that love would be enough to get them through anything. "Do you remember our wedding day?" David asked, picking up the frame. "Of course I do. You said in your vows that you would love me through the good times and the bad times, through sickness and health. For better or worse." Lisa's shoulders shook with fresh tears. "I remember. But you didn't mean it, did you? When things got hard, when you got lonely, you didn't come to me. You went to him." "I tried to talk to you," Lisa said desperately. "Remember last month when I asked if we could go for a walk after dinner? You said you were too tired. Remember when I suggested we get a babysitter and go out for our anniversary? You said we couldn't afford it because you were saving money for something." David set the wedding photo back down. She was right about those things. He had been tired. He had been saving money, but he had thought she understood. He had thought she knew it was all for her. "I was planning to surprise you with Paris," he said. "I wanted to give you something amazing, something that would show you how much you mean to me. But I didn't need Paris, David, I needed you. I needed my husband to see me, to really see me, not just the mother of his child or the person who keeps his house clean." David felt like he was drowning. How had they gotten so lost? How had two people who once loved each other so much become strangers? "So what happens now?" he asked. Lisa looked around their bedroom as if she was seeing it for the first time. "I don't know. I honestly don't know." "Do you love him?" The question hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Lisa was quiet for so long that David thought she might not answer. "I thought I did," she finally said. "But now I think I was just in love with the way he made me feel about myself." "And how do you feel about me?" Lisa met his eyes for the first time since he had walked into the room. "I love you, David. I've always loved you. But I don't know if love is enough anymore. I don't know if we can fix this." David sat back down heavily. "Sophie asked me earlier if we were getting divorced." Lisa's face went white. "What did you tell her?" "I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her parents broke each other's hearts? She's so young, Lisa whispered. She doesn't deserve this. No, she doesn't, but she's going to have to live with it for the rest of her life. Because of the choices we made. Because of the choice you made. Lisa flinched at the words, but David couldn't take them back. And he wasn't sure he wanted to. What about counseling? Lisa asked suddenly. Maybe we could see someone, try to work through this. David thought about it. He thought about sitting in some therapist's office talking about their feelings and their problems while a stranger took notes. He thought about trying to rebuild trust that had been shattered into a million pieces. I don't know if I can trust you again, he said honestly. Every time you leave the house, I'm going to wonder where you're really going. Every time you get a text message, I'm going to wonder who it's from. Every time you say you love me, I'm going to remember that you said the same thing to him. Lisa was crying again, but quietly this time. So that's it? 9 years of marriage and we're just going to throw it all away? You threw it away the moment you brought him into our bed, David said. I'm just facing the reality of what's left. They sat in silence for a long time. David could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the minutes. It had been his grandmother's clock, and Lisa had always loved the sound it made. She used to say it made the house feel like a real home. I should go stay with my sister for a while, Lisa finally said. Give us both some time to think. David nodded. That's probably best. What about Sophie? How do we tell her? Carefully, honestly. But we make sure she knows that none of this is her fault and that we both love her more than anything in the world. Lisa stood up slowly, like her whole body hurt. I'll pack a bag. As she moved around the room, gathering clothes and toiletries, David watched her. This woman who had shared his bed for 9 years, who had given birth to his daughter, who had been his best friend and his partner in everything. How had they gotten here? Lisa, he said as she zipped up her suitcase. She turned to look at him. If you had just talked to me, if you had told me you were lonely, that you needed more from me, I would have done anything to fix it. I would have worked less, spent more time at home, taken you on dates, whatever you needed. You know that, right? Fresh tears spilled down Lisa's cheeks. I know. That's what makes this so much worse. You're a good man, David. You're a good father and a good husband, and I threw it all away for someone who doesn't even matter. Then why did you do it? Lisa was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Because it was easier than having a hard conversation with you. Because it was easier to pretend I was happy with someone else than to admit that I was unhappy in my marriage. Because I'm a coward. David felt something shift inside his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of it. We both made mistakes, he said quietly. I should have seen that you were hurting. I should have made time for us, not just for work and bills and all the practical stuff. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, it doesn't, but maybe it explains it. Lisa picked up her suitcase and walked toward the bedroom door. At the threshold, she turned back one more time. I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you or Sophie. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that. I know, David said. But wanting and doing are two different things. After Lisa left, David sat alone in their bedroom for a long time. The house felt empty and strange without her in it. He looked at their wedding photo again, at the two young people who had thought they knew everything about love and forever. His phone buzzed with a text from Jenny, asking if everything was okay and if Sophie could stay the night. David texted back that yes, she could stay, and that he would explain everything tomorrow. Tomorrow. When he would have to tell his daughter that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live together anymore. When he would have to figure out how to rebuild his life from scratch. When he would have to decide whether to cancel the Paris trip or go alone. David lay down on his bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. 9 years of marriage, and it had all fallen apart in one afternoon. But as he closed his eyes, he realized that maybe, just maybe, falling apart was the first step toward building something better. 3 months had passed since that Tuesday afternoon when David's world fell apart. The leaves on the maple tree in his front yard were starting to turn yellow, and there was a cool bite in the morning air that reminded him autumn was coming. He sat on the steps of his new apartment building, watching Sophie chase fallen leaves in the small courtyard while they waited for Lisa to pick her up. The apartment wasn't much to look at from the outside. It was a simple 2-story building with 8 units, the kind of place where young couples just starting out usually lived. But it was clean and safe, and most importantly, it had 2 bedrooms so Sophie could have her own space when she stayed with him on weekends. "Daddy, look!" Sophie called out, holding up a bright red leaf. "This one looks like a heart." David smiled and waved at her. These moments had become precious to him over the past few months. Every laugh, every silly observation, every hug felt like a gift he didn't want to take for granted anymore. The first few weeks after Lisa moved out had been the hardest thing David had ever lived through. Telling Sophie that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live together anymore had broken his heart all over again. She had cried and asked if it was her fault, and David had held her while she sobbed, promising her over and over that none of this was because of anything she had done. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are too big to fix," he had explained to her. "But that doesn't change how much we love you. Mommy and I will always be your parents, and we will always love you more than all the stars in the sky." Sophie had been confused and angry at first. She didn't understand why she had to have 2 homes now, why her parents couldn't just say sorry and be a family again like in the movies. There were nights when David would get calls from Lisa saying Sophie was crying and asking to come to Daddy's house, and nights when Sophie would cry herself to sleep at his apartment asking when Mommy was coming home. But kids were tougher than adults sometimes gave them credit for. Slowly, Sophie had started to adjust. She had helped David decorate his apartment, picking out cheerful yellow curtains for her bedroom and insisting that her stuffed rabbit Benny needed his own special shelf. She had made friends with Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who lived next door, and always had homemade cookies ready when Sophie came to visit. David looked at his watch. Lisa would be here any minute to pick up Sophie for their week together. The custody arrangement they had worked out was simple. Sophie would spend 1 week with each parent, switching on Sundays. It wasn't perfect, but it was working better than David had expected. A familiar car pulled into the parking lot, and David's stomach tightened slightly like it always did when he saw Lisa. 3 months of separation hadn't made these handoffs any easier. There was still too much hurt, too many unspoken words between them. Lisa got out of the car and walked toward them. She looked different somehow, thinner maybe, and there were new lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. David wondered if he looked different to her too. "Hi, sweetheart," Lisa said as Sophie ran up to her with the red leaf. "Mommy, look what I found. Daddy and I were talking about how leaves change colors when it gets cold." Lisa smiled, the first genuine smile David had seen from her in months. "It's beautiful, honey, just like you." David gathered Sophie's backpack and handed it to Lisa. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and he felt a familiar ache in his chest. Some things never got easier. "How was your week?" Lisa asked quietly. "Good. She's doing really well in school. Her teacher says she's caught up on all the reading she missed when—" David trailed off. They both knew what he meant. "That's good. I'm glad." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, watching Sophie run back to chase more leaves. Once, upon a time, they would have been chasing those leaves with her, laughing together as a family. Now they were like polite strangers, careful not to say the wrong thing. "David," Lisa said suddenly, "I wanted to tell you something. I stopped seeing Ryan 2 months ago." David felt something twist in his stomach. He hadn't asked about the other man, hadn't wanted to know if they were still together. "Oh. It wasn't real. Whatever I thought I felt, it was just me running away from my problems. From us." David nodded but didn't say anything. What was there to say? "I've been seeing a counselor," Lisa continued. "Dr. Williams. She's helping me understand why I made the choices I made, why I hurt the people I love most." "That's good," David said, and he meant it. "I'm glad you're getting help." Are you, have you thought about talking to someone too? David had thought about it. His friend Tony from work had suggested it after finding David sitting alone in his truck during lunch break one too many times. But David wasn't sure he was ready to talk to a stranger about the mess his life had become. Maybe eventually, he said. Sophie came running back to them, her cheeks red from the cool air and the exercise. Are we going to Grandma's house today, Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Grandma is making your favorite soup for dinner. Lisa's mother had been a rock during all of this. She had been furious with Lisa at first, but she had also made it clear that Sophie's well-being came first. She babysat when Lisa had to work late and had even invited David for dinner a few times just so Sophie could have both her parents in the same room. Tell Grandma I said hi, David said, kneeling down to hug Sophie goodbye. I will. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Princess. I'll see you next Sunday, okay? As he watched them drive away, David felt the familiar mix of sadness and relief that came with these transitions. He missed Sophie terribly when she wasn't with him, but he also knew she was safe and loved with Lisa. And these quiet evenings, alone, had become important to him in ways he hadn't expected. David climbed the stairs to his second-floor apartment and unlocked the door. The place was small but cozy. He had painted the living room a warm blue color that Sophie had picked out, and the walls were covered with her artwork and photos of the two of them together. The kitchen table where he ate his meals alone was the same one from their old house. Lisa had insisted he take it. He made himself a simple dinner of pasta and sauce, then settled down at his computer to work on something he had started a few weeks ago. It was a photo album for Sophie, filled with pictures from her whole life. Pictures of her as a baby, her first steps, her first day of school, family vacations to the lake, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. He wanted her to have something that showed how much joy she had brought to their lives, even if their family looked different now. As he worked, David thought about the conversation he'd had with his boss, Pete, earlier that week. Pete had offered him a promotion to site supervisor, which would mean better pay but also more responsibility and longer hours. 6 months ago, David would have jumped at the chance. More money meant more security for his family, more opportunities for Sophie. But now he wasn't sure. The extra money would be nice, especially with 2 households to support now. But he had learned something important over the past few months. Sophie needed him present, not just providing. She needed a father who came to her school plays and helped with her homework and was there to tuck her in at night, at least during the weeks she stayed with him. David's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his sister Karen, who lived 2 states away. How are you doing, little brother? Haven't heard from you in a while. David smiled as he typed back, I'm okay. Sophie's doing well. Taking it one day at a time. Proud of you, came the quick reply. You're handling this better than I would. David wasn't so sure about that. There were still nights when he lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what he could have done differently. There were still moments when he saw a couple holding hands or laughing together and felt a sharp stab of loneliness. There were still times when he felt angry at Lisa, angry at himself, angry at the whole situation, but there were good moments too. Like last weekend when Sophie had insisted on making pancakes from scratch and had gotten flour all over the kitchen. Or the evening when Mrs. Chen had invited them both for tea, and Sophie had spent an hour learning to play Chinese checkers. Or the phone call from Sophie's teacher saying she had made a new friend at school and seemed to be adjusting well to the changes at home. David finished working on the photo album and closed his laptop. Tomorrow was Monday, which meant another week of work, another week without Sophie, another week of figuring out how to build a new kind of normal. But it also meant he was 1 week closer to next Sunday, when Sophie would come running up the stairs to tell him about everything that had happened while they were apart. He walked over to the window and looked out at the courtyard where Sophie had been playing earlier. The red leaf she had found was still there on the ground, bright against the gray concrete, like a little spot of beauty in an ordinary place. David realized that's what his life was becoming. Not the fairy tale family he had once imagined, but something real and complicated and beautiful in its own way. He was learning to be a different kind of father than he had planned to be. Not the provider who worked endless hours to give his family everything they wanted, but the dad who was present for the small moments that actually mattered. His phone rang, and Sophie's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Daddy. I'm at Grandma's house and I wanted to tell you good night." "Hi, sweetheart. Did you have a good dinner?" "Yes. And Grandma taught me how to knit. I'm making you a scarf for when it gets really cold." David smiled, feeling that familiar. Warmth spread through his chest. "I can't wait to see it." "Daddy?" "Yes? I know you and Mommy aren't together anymore, but I still have the best daddy in the whole world." David closed his eyes, feeling tears threaten. "And I have the best daughter in the whole world." After they hung up, David sat in his quiet apartment and realized something important. His marriage had ended, his family had been broken apart, and his heart had been shattered. But he hadn't lost everything. He still had Sophie's love, and that was worth more than all the Paris trips and perfect families in the world. He was learning to forgive Lisa, not because what she did was okay, but because carrying anger was too heavy a burden. He was learning to forgive himself for the ways he had failed as a husband. Most importantly, he was learning that sometimes the best thing you can do when life falls apart is to pick up the pieces that matter most and build something new. As David got ready for bed, he looked at the picture of Sophie on his nightstand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, new moments of missing the life he used to have. But it would also bring new possibilities, new ways to show his daughter how much he loved her, new chances to be the father she deserved. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.